and welcome to the OSBA Forum. I'm Mark Bobo, and today we're talking about a very important and growing movement in education. This is Ohio's focus on the science of reading. It's a pretty big deal because it's changing the way we teach reading and how we're helping students all across the state. We have some phenomenal guests with us here today, and we're also going to talk to a school district who's making great progress with this approach, Lockland Local School. So let's jump right in. We're excited, honored, and happy to have Ohio's Chief Literacy Officer, Dr. Melissa Weber-Mayrer, with us here today. Dr. Weber-Mayrer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, awesome. So to kick things off, for those who may not be aware, can you explain what exactly is the science of reading and why it is such an important approach for literacy in the state of Ohio?
Of course. Well, the science of reading has become kind of a national phrase. I would recommend replacing the word science with the research on reading. The science of reading is the research around how you learn to read. And so there's a plethora of research for decades that have been out there about how to teach reading, the best ways to learn how to read, and more importantly, how the brain learns how to read. So we can't ignore the research, and that's where we're going in Ohio. At some point in the United States, we got away from explicitly teaching skills that are critical to learning to read, specifically systematic approaches to teaching phonemic awareness and phonics. And students need to be fluent in these skills. And those are the skills that we call word recognition. That's part of the science and the research. But there's also language comprehension. And the language comprehension would include background knowledge and vocabulary, language structures, print knowledge, and verbal reasoning. So those are what you think about when we think about what is the science of reading. What do we need to know in order to be proficient readers? And so if we know this, we have an obligation in Ohio to ensure that every student has the opportunity to learn these skills, and every teacher has the knowledge and strategies and practices to be able to effectively teach these skills to all kids, whether they are just learning how to read or they're in middle school and they're still struggling on reading proficiently at grade level or in high school.
So I love the way you put that. You made us focus on the research of reading. I think each of us can certainly appreciate evidence-based practices and strategies that make a difference. So in that same vein, I want you to share with us, because I know our state has been doing some great work in literacy in these recent years. Share with us some of the big wins or milestones that we've seen as the state has embraced, if I may say, the research of reading.
Yes, thank you. Good question. I would say the department started this work in about 2016 with a pilot, and then we used those lessons with 16 different schools to really outline a state plan for raising literacy achievement, starting from birth, when babies are born, all the way into higher ed and how we teach pre-service teachers how to read. And so Governor DeWine, what we did was we tested some things out. We learned from the things that we tested out. We made some recommendations to Governor DeWine. He listened. He was looking at the data. We've been looking at the data pre-pandemic and then watched it dip substantially during the pandemic. We're about back to where we were before the pandemic, but we know we still need to do better. So we made those recommendations to Governor DeWine, who then put some things into the last budget bill that really helped us at the agency with implementation statewide. So before we were implementing in, with pilots or with federal grants. This is an implementation that is a blanket covering our state, which is exciting to see. And so some of the results that we're seeing are schools and districts purchasing high quality instructional materials that are aligned to that reading research. And so the materials are in place K through 3 for that core instruction, which are those critical ages for learning to read, but also I should include preschool too, and also kindergarten through grade 12 with intervention, because we know that we have adolescents that still need some interventions on specific skills to be fluent readers at grade level to access, let's say, science texts, social studies texts. So we also have curriculum materials that are including that intervention. A second component would be the completion of professional learning opportunities for every teacher in Ohio. And so this is preschool through grade 12. It is even if you are even if you are an art teacher, social studies teacher, technology teacher, there is a requirement for learning about this reading science, and how that might pertain to what vocabulary words you're teaching your students in middle school and high school. The other big piece about the professional learning was giving that or having administrators participate in the professional learning. So principals are digging deep into this reading science, and they are setting up structures around their teachers to be able to be successful and for these approaches to be sustainable within their buildings. And that's exciting to see. And then the final thing that was put in place that would be a huge success, and I would say a milestone, are literacy coaches in Ohio's lowest performing schools. And to date, these literacy coaches have conducted 27,000 coaching sessions. And these could be one-on-one with a teacher, small group coaching, and larger group coaching. But the coaching is focused on, and this is all coming from the teachers and all coming from principals, because they're coaching classrooms, but also coaching systems coaching with principals and building leaders. And the focus is on evidence-based practices and strategies. So what are the best ones for me to teach based on what my students need? The use of assessment and data and data-based decision-making. So how do I use all this data that I have to inform my lessons, to move students forward, and address where they might be still getting hung up on some of those strategies? Wow. And I'd say, sorry, I said that was the final one.
That's all right.
There's one more. Would be another big milestone was that we just launched the Governor's Science of Reading Champions recognition program, and we awarded 48 schools across Ohio this Governor's Science of Reading Champion award.
That is amazing. All of those initiatives that you spoke of seem to directly contribute to this being a successful initiative. I think I heard you say 27,000 literacy coaching sessions across our state. That's really phenomenal, and the support that's being given to our administrators and teachers, that's so important when you have initiatives to this level that will make a difference for our kids. But as always, we can talk about the successes and wins, and we love that. But we also have to be honest. We also are faced with challenges anytime you try to put in a new initiative. And so I would ask, what are the most common obstacles that schools are facing, and how is the state stepping in to help?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because there are still challenges. And I mentioned the curriculum materials, the high quality instructional materials. One of the challenges is these are expensive. It's expensive for a district to purchase new curriculum materials. Now, the state in the last budget, Governor DeWine earmarked funding to subsidize the purchase of these materials, but it doesn't cover the full cost of a whole new set of curriculum materials for K-3 and intervention materials for K-12. So I would say that is one of the biggest obstacles when we think about implementation. The other thing with the curriculum materials is time. So it's not just about semi trucks pulling up in front of district central offices and unloading curriculum materials, and then poof, magically everyone's going to learn how to read. But implementing those materials takes time. And so professional learning around those instructional materials takes time, and coaching and support for teachers with implementation takes time. And it's if you don't have those supports, that structure and system around you as an educator, and I can speak as a former classroom teacher, it's really easy to fall back on the practices that you're familiar with if you don't have the support to help you implement new practices that you just learned, either through the professional learning or that are connected to the curriculum materials. I think another challenge is keeping our leaders engaged. Our educational leaders must be engaged and must be knowledgeable, so that when they're doing, classroom walkthroughs or instructional rounds, they know what they're looking at and they know what they're looking for, and they can help their teachers with implementation. So really, the places where we've seen great success is where we have principals, assistant principals, superintendents highly engaged with the intervention and instructional practices, and not just piling on the classroom teachers. I think another common obstacle is the deselection of activities or materials. So oftentimes we purchase more, but we don't get rid of any of them. And so now you have, and I've been to schools where they show me, they open doors and there's a room full of all kinds of instructional materials that they've been collecting, in some cases for decades. And so the deselection of materials is just as important as the selection, because otherwise then there's too many things for teachers to choose from, and we get confused and overwhelmed. And so that's another. A third would be master schedules. This requires some schedule changes in elementary schools and middle schools and even high schools when you think about providing intervention for if you have a high number of students not reading at grade level. And then the student mobility is another piece that schools don't have control over, whether students move from building to building or they're moving from district to district. Having this as a statewide effort ensures that even if students move from building to building or district to district, there are some commonalities where the student can hopefully kind of move right in, and the teachers are using the same types of teaching approaches, probably not the same types of curriculum materials because we have a large list, but at least we know those curriculum materials do align to those components that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, to be very frank, the challenges that you speak of are so real and have a genuine impact on the student achievement, particularly when you're trying to put a new initiative in place. But to hear you say that the state is acknowledging those things and providing resources and helps for that's really critical. And I think one part that really stuck out for me was when you said keeping the instructional leaders engaged, your building principals, and it's not just an initiative to put on the teachers, but keeping them engaged. And I guess a follow-up question I would have with that as an instructional leader, when you're looking at this initiative, what things should I be seeing when I walk into a classroom? How does the Science of Reading initiative look in action from an instructional standpoint?
That is a great question, and we've been working to develop kind of sample walkthrough tools for principals on exactly what you're asking. What should I see? What should I be looking for? And so classrooms where teachers are implementing these components aligned to reading science are very active classrooms. So it shouldn't be quiet. There's lots of things happening. There may be whole group instruction, and whole group instruction would be introducing something new. And oftentimes what you would see is support adults around the room. So let's say the intervention specialist or a speech and language pathologist, kind of watching as kids are learning new things and identifying right there in real time which student is not getting it right, or is not like catching on, and pulling them right away and providing that intervention right away in small group. You will also see probably more, because teachers, many teachers, not all, are the whole explicit systematic instruction of phonics and phonemic awareness seems to be showing up a lot more now. So you'll see that, but what an administrator also needs to see are the language comprehension skills. So be very careful about going too far on the phonics end and not building vocabulary or background knowledge, because those things are going to impact your comprehension and your reading skills as well. So I think those are, especially in the younger grades, what you're going to see. In the older grades, or let's say an administrator is wants to stop into an intervention session that is a one-on-one intervention session. Within that session, you would see, and even in whole group, the materials, hopefully you're seeing those materials that you just purchased being used, and being used with what we are supporting districts and saying integrity. The word fidelity is floating around out there. That makes people a little skittish, and it makes you think of, I have to do the same thing with every kid at the same time in the same way. And so our team in the regional support structure, folks that we work with, are really trying to switch to that integrity of implementation and having our administrators understand what that means. And integrity is using the curriculum materials, using the practices, but using it based on what that child needs as they're sitting in front of you. So if a principal is observing a one-on-one, like intensive intervention session, they should see the materials being used, the teacher responsive to the students' responses or reactions to the intervention. They should see progress monitoring happening, and then teachers planning their next moves based on what the interactions are with that student.
Well, let me ask you, Dr. Weber-Mayrer, as we look into the future for the state of Ohio, what do you see the future of literacy being for our state, and what hopeful things do you see coming down in the near future?
So I say hope too.
Yes.
I have a director that says, Melissa, hope is not a strategy. So I'm like, okay, I have to remember that. So
Yes.
I think what we will see is sustainable actions. And so we will see districts who, what we have to remember is, and help everybody, is we have to stick with it. We can't get distracted by the next shiny thing or the other noisy thing out there. We have to stay focused on literacy. The governor is committed to continuing that focus on literacy in this budget that's being proposed currently. He has asked for the continuation of those coaches, because that support is really the piece that helps with that integrity of implementation. So when we think about the future in Ohio, I see sustainability, which then will help students as they move, from building to building, whether they're just going from elementary school to middle school to high school in the same district, or they're more mobile across elementary buildings or across districts. Continued coaching is an important piece. Many of Ohio districts have literacy coaches in place that are not funded through the budget, that are huge efforts within districts and making huge changes with teachers in the way instruction is happening. I think the other piece is supporting the systems that I talked about, because the systems need to be in place to outlive the people. At some point, Dr. Weber-Mayrer is going to move on, Principal so-and-so is going to move on. But if the systems are there to keep everything in place, then good practices are still going to be embedded in day-to-day teaching. The third thing would be for adults, me included, to continue to learn. So the research is still going to be moving. Our student population is going to change. We've seen that in Ohio across just even the 10 years I've been at the agency. We have many more multilingual learner families moving into Ohio, so which means our practices as educators need to shift and address those needs of those students. And I think what we're looking at, and I know we're looking at the agency, is as we move to sustain these efforts, part of it is to continue to build that knowledge, but also go deeper within that knowledge on how do we serve specific subgroups of students. So like our students who are gifted, our students with disabilities, our data does not look great for our students with disabilities. And same with our multilingual learner students, as well as just meeting the needs of all students. And that's our goal. That's the vision I see in the future, is that every educator and every leader can look at a child who is struggling and say, "Oh, I know what this child needs, and I know how to serve that child."
Well, despite what the director may have said, you have offered us hope today that the initiative is going to continue to make a difference for our students. So, Dr. Weber-Mayrer, thank you so much for being here today. Again, thank you for all that you're doing to help our students continue to achieve here in the state of Ohio. And we're hopeful and we're encouraged that this initiative, the Science of Reading, will continue to make inroads for our students. So thanks again for being here on the forum.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here and honored to lead this work for our state.
So when we return, Lockland Local Schools Superintendent Bob Longworth will be here to talk about his district's success since adopting the Science of Reading. Welcome back. We're excited to have Superintendent Bob Longworth from Lockland Local Schools with us. Lockland has been ahead of the curve when it comes to adopting the science of reading. Superintendent Longworth, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So as I said, Lockland started implementing the science of reading a few years ago before, the initiative was statewide. I want you to kind of walk us through your decision-making process and what made you decide to go this route and what the process literally looked like.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's been a really long walk for us. This is a process that actually started in 2016. We're going on nearly 10 years of a really concentrated effort to learn more about what we can do differently and, more importantly, better to improve teaching and learning outcomes as it relates to reading and literacy goals with all of our students in Lockland schools. I think it's important to start with context, Mark. We are, as all districts are very diverse and unique, we are no exception. We do have some inherent challenges that come along with the jobs that we've signed on for. We've got absenteeism rates that make it very difficult sometimes to get that continuity of learning. And we have a really high mobility rate in Southwestern Ohio and in Hamilton County. We have more kids that come and go from our district than we do any other school district in Hamilton County. And our childhood poverty rates, unfortunately, are in about the same spot. So there are some barriers there that we don't have control over, but we realized early on it is extremely important for us to control what we are able to control. And we knew that our outcomes were not at all indicative of what our kids were capable of. So we started this work as a team, really as a result of a grant application. There was a large sum of money that became available through the federal government. It was the Striving Readers Grant. You may remember those applications.
Yep.
And we worked incredibly hard for months to put together a strong application. And I will tell you that that was the first step for us in realizing that we didn't know what we didn't know, and that with intentionality and discipline, we could become far better at what is actually one of the very most important things that we do as a school, and that's teach kids how to read. So that first year was big for us in developing a local literacy plan that allowed for input from all the stakeholders as we really dug into research. The evidence-based practices, along with the resources that are aligned to those practices that have been proven effective in demographics and environments very similar to those that we serve here in Lockland, became our inspiration and our motivation for getting better.
And so, as always, I appreciate how you shared, some of the challenges your district face outside of, curriculum implementation, just real things that many of our districts are facing. And that said, you're bringing in the science of reading, which is a major change from what you were doing previously. And as what were some of the roadblocks you hit early on? And were there any surprises in terms of how students and teachers adapted to the science of reading?
Well, ironically enough, what really got us going was failure. The first roadblock was we didn't win the award. We didn't get the grant. We had spent 9 months putting together a local literacy plan. We had developed internal capacity and knew better at this point. So we knew it was incumbent upon us to do better, but it did not come with the financial incentives that initially sent us down this path. So that was our first challenge. But the reality is our people then knew we had to do this with or without the financial support to make it happen, because the futures of our kids and the families of our community depended upon it. So for us, an initial challenge was trying to build that internal capacity that's really needed within a school district to understand the why behind a change prior to really digging into the what and the how that need to be done differently as a result of the change. So for us, we became very, very close partners with organizations that, quite frankly, we should have been strong partners with anyway. It opened up our eyes to the fact that resources at the county level with our educational service centers were very well equipped to help us build the internal capacity that we needed, not just with the literacy initiative, because this required us to reallocate funding, reallocation of resources, and really the reallocation of priorities in some instances. We leaned heavily on the Ohio Department of Education. Melissa Weber-Mayrer was instrumental in that work. There were so many times that I would reach out to individuals at the department with questions, whether it was while trying to write the grant, or more importantly, when we were trying to implement that local literacy plan in a meaningful way that would impact kids. And lastly, I would say that the partnerships that we were able to grow as a result of this initiative in our post-secondary community, namely Mount St. Joseph University right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, they have become a true partner in education for us. And when we look at some of the long-term professional learning and development that goes along with a shift like this teaching and learning will require any schoolhouse to do, it made it so much easier to have a network of professionals outside of the K-12 public education realm to work with and bounce ideas off of, and more importantly, to help us with some of the technical skill that was needed to professionally develop our own teachers to do a better job with kids and families here in our schoolhouses.
So, Bob, I want to push a little bit because you said something that sparked my attention. You said failure got us going, and our community realized we have to get this done despite us not getting that funding that we were looking for. I want to tap into your leadership model a little bit. So when we saw that we didn't get the grant, how are you able to continue to galvanize your staff, the community, to still say we still have to get this done? What did you do to keep them engaged?
That's a great question. What we did was that local literacy plan was the key to our success, and we knew it. It wasn't dollars that would help us implement it. We knew that the information we needed to do better was right there at our fingertips, and we really understood it. And because of that, we immediately started looking at our comprehensive continuous improvement planning as a school district to say, how does this really complex plan speak to some of the action steps and goals that are aligned to this local literacy plan? We can no longer serve as an organization with plans that work in isolation. Everything really must become an integrated system, just like we want to see in place that our teachers are using to help kids when they need extra help in class. So for us, it was a great opportunity to reevaluate all of our priorities as a district, because the investment that's required in human capital is real, whether that is your existing staff and the continuous ongoing job embedded professional development that we know teachers need to stay sharp and to stay motivated. That's one piece of it. And I will tell you, the more you realize that you're not meeting the mark, the more it forces you to make decisions about how you're allocating resources, and more specifically human capital within your organization, to make sure that you really have all the supports that you need in place to help kids. Because the bottom line is, we don't have time to wait. The kids that are in class right now need this help now. And while we're constantly working to get better, I will tell you, I think another piece of this is the reality that it's an everyday plan. The work that we're doing every day with kids has to be driven from that common focus area. And that was a challenge at first. Change is a challenge in any organization. We are certainly no exception. But by changing the way that we learned together as a community, meaning the staff primarily, that really helped to change the culture of the schoolhouse and our staff, if I'm being candid, in a manner that allowed us to more clearly communicate our non-negotiables. These are the things that everyone that works in Lockland schools believe. And it starts with all kids can and will be very successful if we're lucky enough to keep our hands on them for long enough. And honestly, that is the key to a lot of positive change. There has to be true belief. We restructured our teacher-based team meetings to dig into this body of research so that we had better understood the why. We restructured our building leadership team meetings. We refocused conversations at the district leadership team level to reflect this work, so that the progress monitoring during the implementation phase was truly being monitored and not just trusted across all of our systems of oversight. So that allowed everyone to take a lot more ownership in the initiatives. And Mark, I'll tell you the last thing is people hear about these literacy initiatives and they think, oh, that's great for the reading department. I think it's really important to understand that one of our first steps with professional development as a district was ensuring that everyone that works with kids and written text and communication goals and written communication goals need to understand the science of reading and how it's very appropriate to teach kids to read far beyond primary school. And I think that is a bit of a worldview change for a lot of educators, and we were certainly no exception. But we really want to get more to the point where we teach kids and not content, and we realize that every teacher is a reading teacher.
Yeah, that integration throughout the district is so key in implementing successful initiatives. Well, listen, we want to hear about the positive progress that you've made in regards to the science of reading and implementation. Share with us some of the improvements that you've seen in the literacy outcomes. As you said, almost 10 years of doing this work.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I'm going to tell you first and foremost, the most promising data that I can share as a result of this work is not going to be student outcome data. It's actually going to be staff retention data, Mark.
Wow.
About 6 or 7 years ago, our school district, unfortunately, would lose about 50 to 60% of the certified staff at the end of each school year because it was, quite frankly, in a lot of exit interviews, it was shared that it was a really, really challenging work environment. And teachers a lot of times didn't feel like they had the support that they needed to be successful, which resulted in frustration, which resulted in burnout, and resulted in additional inconsistencies for kids. What I can share at this point is for the last 2 consecutive years, we've had a 95% plus retention rate of our staff. And here's why that's important. Our professional development plan is no longer a 1-year plan. It's a very comprehensive 5-year plan that integrates all of our district comprehensive improvement goals, inclusive of literacy. And in order to really build out and truly scaffold learning for anyone, it's important to have that continuity. So now that we have 9.5 out of 10 teachers coming back every year, what we're able to do in terms of the depth of knowledge that we're able to really embrace with some of our learning is far more meaningful and impactful than it is when we really have to kind of start over every year with that staff retention piece. So that's always the first piece I like to point to. But let's be real. At the end of the day, we're all held accountable with test scores. And just from a quick glance this morning before hopping on, I can see that the 3rd grade state testing proficiency rate last year represents a 400% increase from us 3 years ago. So we're seeing 4 times the number of 3rd graders that are proficient on the state test, which is very encouraging for us. We still have a lot of work to do. Mark, I'll tell you, there are examples that I looked at where the percentage of kids that are scoring at a proficient level in reading in multiple grade levels has doubled for us over the last 3 years. And that's encouraging. We are nowhere near where we need to be, but we can see that we are moving the needle. We are moving it in the right direction. And I'll tell you another thing that I'll share is our graduation rate has gone up over the last few years as well. We're knocking on the door of 90% right now. And Mark, there were years when that was a 65, 70% graduation rate. So that's encouraging. We have seen some increases in student attendance over the last 2 years. I do believe that building confidence in these areas is certainly a contributing factor to that. When kids have that confidence and that success and relationships with teachers that come back every year, I think it makes them more likely to come back every day. And those are all things that we're excited about. And I really do believe they directly correlate and are contributing factors to this literacy work here in Lockland.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of that data that you just shared I did not immediately see a correlation between the science of reading and the intentionality of the implementation to staff retention. I think any district would be extremely happy to see a 95% retention rate in regards to the staff. And it allows, as you said, to build on that continuity that you have teachers who know what Lockland's about. And even as new teachers come in, they buy into the Lockland way of doing things. I think that is phenomenal. So as we come to a close, Bob, I want to ask two things of you. One, share with us, with all the progress that Lockland has made, what do you see next for the district? But then I want you to also speak to those districts. Obviously, this initiative is all over the state. If you could just offer some advice or encouragement to those districts who are, in those first few years of implementation, how to go forward and continue to stay within the initiative to make a difference for kids.
Well, I'm glad you asked both questions. I'll start with the first one is, what are our next steps? So we have built out a literacy department in this small school district with very limited resources through prioritization. And the results of those efforts are they're yielding data that shows that far fewer kids are in need of Tier 2 small group and Tier 3 individualized reading support at the primary grade levels, which is wonderful news. The Tier 1 work that we're doing, the foundational skills that are essential to comprehension with literacy, they're being mastered at much higher levels than what we were accustomed to. That is allowing us to shift our human capital and resource focus to some older students that also have some reading deficits, where there's also a very strong body of research as to what strategies and what resources will help to close those gaps quickly. And we've been able to apply what we've learned in kindergarten through third grade all the way up through the sixth grade of our school district this year. We are anticipating services that will be wrapped around up through eighth grade next year with the same intervention supports. And then lastly, I think what's exciting for us is we see this model works, and we see that the legislature is already talking about math improvement and monitoring plans in very much so the same way they did with the science of reading. And quite frankly, I support that. I think that's a wonderful initiative. And it's allowed us to take the next steps with some confidence as we build out a similar structure and framework for our math instruction. And what this is serving is these are just evidence-based practices that would be good in all core content areas whenever a child needs extra help. And it's allowing us to think about the way we do business a little bit differently. And Mark, that's where I'm going to launch into your second question is, what are some recommendations that you have for districts that are about to tackle this work? And really, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the school board in this work. As a school board member, I think it's important sometimes to ask the tough questions. I think your constituents depend on you to do that. And when you're talking about things like the science of reading, that really I think everyone can agree on, this is where we can really get into some of the details as to why this is good for kids and good for families. I would ask questions like, well, why are we making this shift? How do we know we're ready for this? And if we're not, it's okay. But how are we going to make sure that we get ready for this right now because our kids need it now? What fiscal priorities do we need to reevaluate, or what fiscal priorities are we prepared to evaluate if and when we see that we need to double down because we're doing a really good job for kids and families and we want to grow it? These are all proactive approaches that I think school boards can begin to wrap their minds around, and their administrators will surely appreciate that, because this is an investment in our future and it is a change in behavior. But in today's world and in today's economy, it is important to recognize that this is also a financial investment. And in order to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we have access to do the great work that we're charged with, it is incumbent upon us to really do our homework with this. And I would tell you, Lockland exists as a resource, just like so many others throughout the state. There are other districts that we've had the opportunity to work with along the way that are doing wonderful things for kids. And I think the important thing to remember is even the districts that are considering this change that we know are doing great things for kids, trust the process and trust the research. We know what's right to keep kids safe and healthy and supported in a lot of ways. But as school board members, and quite frankly, a lot of times even as teachers, the science of reading is just that. It is science. And I think it's important just to issue this reminder that it's okay to trust the science here. The body of research is very sound. And I can tell you that just the levels of engagement I see in our classrooms alone as a result of the shift would warrant us making the change. And I think it would warrant anyone else doing the same.
Bob, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your feedback. Certainly, we're excited about the work that you're doing in Lockland and the success that you are seeing as an exemplar to the impact that the science of reading can have. So thank you for being with us here today on the OSBA Forum.
Thank you, Mark. Always appreciate the opportunity to tell Lockland's story, and thank you for the great work you're doing, telling stories all across the state. We appreciate it.
So thanks again to Dr. Melissa Weber-Mayrer and Superintendent Bob Longworth for sharing their insights and experiences today. Ohio is clearly on the right track when it comes to improving literacy, and it's inspiring to see progress that's already being made. So to you, our viewers, again, thank you for joining us at the OSBA Forum. For those that are watching today, I want you to know that we as your association, we appreciate all that you do in regards to your school districts and the impact that you're making in your community. So we'll be back next time with more critical conversations about making a difference in our schools. So until then, keep up the great work in your districts, and we'll see you next time on the OSBA Forum.